you doing, everybody? I'm here in the cycle car workshop where it's nice and air conditioned. You know, it's summertime here in Arizona, and today it's 108 degrees outside. So thankfully I'm inside. I also have some new prescription glasses. They're good for up close. Really nice. I'm glad to have them. Kind of look like a brainiac though. Anyway, the Monocar has been out of service. You noticed it wasn't at Tieton this year. I drove the BMW. And most of you are aware, but for those of you who don't know, last December I crashed the Monocar into a pole. Yep, that's what happened. So I won't go into detail right now, but over the last 7 months, I've little by little been working on it. Finally I made a push to get this thing up and running, and I wanted to document the process. So first I'll start out with some photographs of the scene and when I was tearing it down. Then there's some video of me, redoing the panels and what have you. And then at the end of this video, I'll do some test driving. So what do you say we get to it? It's taken me about 6 months to get this thing back on its wheels and driving, and right now, it's running and driving. But I really want to get this body back on there, and this whole nose section here is underneath is made from wood, and it got a little beat up, so I have to make a couple new pieces. One thing I'm going to do is put a new vintage style tank. I bought this from Steve Vinson. So it's almost identical to the other tank I had that got stolen out of my car. I've been using this mini bike tank, and it's just not holding up. It leaks. It leaks down here at the bung, and it just can't handle the vibration. So, okay, lots to do. This should be fun. Here is the wooden substructure to the nose. This whole piece here just broke off, so I have to make a new piece here and a couple of other things. This cone was glued with epoxy to this disc, so I can remove that, and I think I can repair that without too much trouble. Probably make a new one of these. This is the cover, the top shroud, so to speak. Alright, let's get to work on this thing. Get it back on the car. After a thorough examination, I determined that the best course is to make a new one of these and a new one of these, mainly because the screw holes and the wood is all wallowed out, split. I have a pattern. On the cone, this is in good shape. This will re-glue in and I can straighten the cone out, so that should be okay. I'll make a new shroud. I pounded on this for the sake of doing it, but this metal has been overworked to where it's just better to make a new one. Okay, let's make some wood parts. Well, with a handful of tools and a couple of hours, I'm almost to the point where I have this substructure put back together. I'm going to make a new one of these because it's all stretched out, but that goes there. Yeah, it's shaping up. Won't be long before I can install it on the car. I have to drill out a few holes here. Yep. Okay, let's keep plugging away. Okay, I'm pretty happy with today's effort. The substructure is on the machine and ready to accept panels. Yeah, okay. Continuing on. My focus now is creating these new side panels. And as I've mentioned before, when I'm making panels, it starts with a pattern. Unfortunately, I have the bent up ones here as a pattern. So I set it on the metal and then I trace around it carefully with a marker, Sharpie. And then I cut right through the middle of that line, because the inside of that line is the panel that I want, is the finished size. So by the time I cut through the middle of that line and then a little bit of hand filing, there's not much to it. It sizes up pretty nice. I already have this one roughed out. I just have to clean it up. Okay, let's keep moving along. Alright, I have the panels shaped to the correct size, taped to the old part, and now I'm going to transfer all of the screw locations. I've got my punch here. Drill them out, and then they'll be ready to install in the car. I'm making some progress. I have the two lower side panels on and they fit very nice. The holes lined up without any problem. So this is coming together pretty good. Somewhere I think I have the pattern for this piece that covers the frame here. I'm going to dig through my archives. That saved me a little bit of time. Alright, so far so good. Here's the piece that covers the chassis. You can see it's got the shape of the pole. So I'm going to cut it off right here, and then I can use that part for a pattern. And then this front piece right here is pretty much square. So it shouldn't be too tough. Alright, let's make that piece next. I was able to salvage this piece and this piece here. So now I have a pattern for a new piece right here. So this slips in here like this. Now it'll bend down 90 degrees right here and cover most of this, about 1.5 inches or 1.75 inches. But I have it fitting pretty good. It's going to overlap this panel, and then screws will go through both. So I have a piece of metal here. It's got some spray paint on it, but it's a perfectly good piece of metal. Anyway, I traced it. This line here is where I bend it. So I'm going to cut this out and see how it fits. I'm going right through the middle of that line. The more accurate you are now, the less cleanup and filing you have to do. Alright, so far so good. So the dry fit looks pretty good. I can finesse it with the file to where these line up just perfectly. Yep. And then after I put it in the brake and bend this, then I'll take some lacquer thinner and take off the paint. Alright, a little bit of file work, and this will be ready to install. Nice. So I'm back from the shop, and I have the piece of metal here. Yeah, this bend looks good here, and there's a little crease right here where the frame angles down. Alright, yeah, I'm happy with that. I have to file on it a little bit, finesse it into shape, then drill some holes and screw it down. We can call that part done. I'm in the process of installing these two top panels, this one and that one there. I decided to salvage them. They only had a couple dents here and there. The worst dent was where my knees slid forward and when I crashed into the pole and dented them, but I can work those out. I had to straighten them up a little bit to get them to go back on. After the mock-up and test riding phase, I'll take the whole thing apart, paint it, and at that point I'll finesse these panels nice and straight and flat again. I didn't really want to have to remake them. They were a bear first time around. Okay, I got all my nuts and bolts, and I'm in the process of putting it back together. With a little bit of persuasion, I managed to install these two panels. So they're back in place. I'm happy with that. And I have a paper pattern in the works here for this top shroud piece. So that's what I'm going to make next, and then I can work on the cone. So this pattern here for this shroud is a little bit tricky. So when I have a pattern that's difficult, I make more than one. So I started with two pieces of paper taped together. Now that wasn't quite thick enough to take on the shape the way I wanted, but it got me close enough to make the next one. Now this one I made out of poster board, which is thick enough, and I laid it on there, taped it down, and cut the two sides nice and straight with a ruler. And then where there were any gaps, like there was a gap here, I put tape down. So then I took this and I traced it onto this pattern, and lo and behold, when I laid this on there, it laid down beautifully. And the poster board is pretty close to the same thickness as the aluminum. So I'll trace this carefully, cut out the aluminum, roll it until it lays on there pretty decent. And but ultimately I'll have to file it to get it just right. But it's pretty close, and I'm real happy with this pattern. So anyway, that was the third version to get where I want to be. So I carefully trace this, and I want a nice wide line. A line that's consistent in width, because I'm going to cut through that with the bandsaw. So it works better if the Sharpie is a little bit dull as opposed to a nice brand new one. Okay, so that's a nice consistent line that's slightly wider than the bandsaw blade, and the inside of that line is exactly the size of the part that I want. Okay, it's ready to cut out. Okay, so here you can see where I've cut it out with the bandsaw, and there's just a slight amount of blue line left, hardly any at all. A couple of passes with the file, and that line is gone, and the part is the size that I want it to be. This is the technique I've used on almost every panel I've ever done, so it works for me. One thing nice about working with 32 thousandths aluminum is you can really form it by hand. First I started just over my knee, got started, and then I have this pipe that I've used to continue the bend, and then I take it in and dry fit it. And I'm telling you, it fits nice. I have a center line I scribed here, and it's not laying all the way down, but if I push it down, which is easy to do, it fits beautifully against these edges here, just like it should, just like the pattern did. So it's just a little bit long. I need to file it here, which actually I'm glad I wanted that to happen. But you can see how it just fits really nice. These holes are 1 inch apart. I'm installing the shroud now. I have 4 screws in so far. It's just a matter of working my way around. I start with a little pilot hole and then run in the screws. Once I get it all screwed down, then I'll file this front edge to be nice and smooth. Alright, I'm glad this one's almost done. I'm happy to report that the top shroud is finished. And it fit on there pretty good. I can live with it. So next I have to put the cone on, and I've been working on it. It still needs a little bit more finesse. It's not quite there, But, you know, it looks like it's going to come together. Just have to be patient. Keep tapping away on it. Trying to close up that gap right there, and it's almost there. It's a little bit stretched out. Anyway, that bolts on. There's a T-nut in there. After I glue this piece of plywood into the cone with epoxy, then it bolts on. And from a size standpoint, looks pretty good. Yep. Okay. Continuing on. It took me a couple of evenings, but I was able to finesse this cone back into shape. I got it to fit pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Let's see, I'm almost done with the reconstruction here. I need to install these pieces. They cover the little openings here. And then this piece goes under here. I gotta put a new screen in it. Alright, it won't take long to get that done. I'm installing a new screen in this little piece. Cut it out with the scissors, and then I'll use epoxy to glue it down. Let's get these things installed. The screen is installed, and the little covers where the tie rods exit. And then I cleaned up and reinstalled these little lower valances. Okay. Well, it's taken me about 3 weeks to get the body back on this thing, but I'm happy that I've completed the task. And the next step will be painting and all of that. Yep, it's starting to look like it used to. I'm turning my attention to the fuel tank. I have to replace it because it's just not holding up to the vibration and the abuse, and it's been leaking right here. So I took off this cover here. Then I removed this shroud. This shroud, although it looks made to look like a vintage engine, this just holds up the gas tank. So it's kind of dirty down in there. So anyway, I have the tank over here. Let me show you what I'm doing. Okay, this is the old tank. This is actually the second tank that's been on the engine. The original tank had some pinholes in it, and I was taking it to get welded, and somebody stole it out of my car, so I had to buy this tank. Anyway, this one developed a leak. You can see a field repair that Joey and I made at Tieton last year, and subsequently it's been leaking ever since. So I'm going to get rid of that tank, and Steve Vincent had this tank in his collection, almost identical to my original tank. I took the fittings off this tank and put them in here along with my see-through bowl there. So now I have to figure out how it's going to install. I have to modify these brackets. These straps that go around the tank are too short. And also the original tank was too low and it caused problems. I have to raise this up a little bit. So I'm going to mock it up. I'll show you what I come up with. So I have the tank mocked up now. I had to make this new bracket. This is just sitting in here loose. It's not bolted in. Because I had to raise up the tank a little bit. Because I wanted to keep this sediment bowl. And now it's in the correct location. I need to spin it around and aim it the other way. Or I guess I could bring the hose down like that. Now I have to extend these to reach all the way around. These are steel, so I can weld those. Alright, so that's a big deal, having a tank that doesn't leak. Every time I would have gas in it, it'd be a slow leak and it'd stink up the garage and the house. So I'm excited to get this thing running again with a tank that does not leak. Okay, so I'm going to get it all bolted up so I can test drive it. I spent a little time trying to improve the look of this bracket, so I made these a little side piece here and one over here. I'd already made this top piece, so that kind of cleans it up. I like that. So I'm almost ready to bolt this thing down for test driving, but then I have to do these straps. So I've been thinking about that. I think I got a plan of attack. As it turned out, this is 16 gauge steel, and that's what these original straps are. So I fashioned a couple of extensions. I'm going to bolt them together here, and then by hand I'll bend this to the shape of the tank. I have to take this all apart one more time to get these just the right size and length to where when you bolt it under here, it tightens up. Alright, let's get that figured out. What do you say we do a few laps around the house? car, this thing gets up and goes. It's like riding a wild bucking bronco. Hard to hold on to.